Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us with another episode of Jafar Show. Today, we're going to be discussing Russia and Ukraine. We're going to be discussing the two famous statements, not 1 inch eastward, not 1 inch eastward. And the famous saying also, Nyet means Nyet. Stay with us. Be right back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for staying with us. So before we go to the invasion of February 2022 that happened from Russia to Ukraine, I would like to get a little bit of information about why is this all happening. And that's what's going to take us back to some days in the past. There are certain events that happened. For example, the Bucharest Summit in Romania. Thus, the summit basically with many countries, they met discussing that we're going to have Albania and Croatia joining, which did join on the year after in 2009. This summit happened in 2008. And in this summit, the U.S. ambassador back then, William J. Burns, he sent a letter to the Secretary of State, Ms. Condoleezza Rice, where he mentioned that that all the elite in Russia, not only Putin, they all say Nyet means Nyet, which is no means no. And he was referring to the expansion of NATO. Why? Because Ukraine and Georgia were discussed in that meeting as well, in the Bucharest meeting. And they were saying, oh, we will let you join in the future. So why we're not letting Ukraine join the NATO? Let's go back in history, ladies and gentlemen, a little bit, okay? Because I wanted to understand what is going on here in the origin. And I'm going to try to go fast with the dates, okay? We have the NATO. It was established in 1949. The goal of the NATO is to guarantee the freedom and security of its members through political and military actions. Excellent. Let me say it just one more time. To guarantee the security and freedom of its members through political and military actions. That's why it was established. All right. Nice. That it was established in 1949, as you can see, right after World War II. So basically, we're trying to build an entity so we don't have any more World War again. So that way, the West can basically control everything and nobody can just make something crazy again, just like what happened with the Nazis. All right. In 1955, they go ahead and they add Germany. All right. See how we're getting a little bit, we're going east now. All right. 1956, Russia asks to join the NATO. Nyet. No, you're not going to join the NATO. Sorry. All right. Why? Well, because your values are not aligned with ours. I mean, I believe that the underlying reason is that the NATO was basically built so Russia cannot do anything. So Russia, China, and all those Eastern countries basically cannot do anything. I believe that was the main reason it was built. So we are now in 1956, the refusal to join the NATO for Russia. Nice. We're going to go all the way up now to 1990, right before the dissolution of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. What happened? Mikhail Gorbachev, back then he was the president, he had basically some diplomatic conversations with who? With the Secretary of State back then, Mr. James Baker. All right. What did James Baker tell ex-president Mikhail Gorbachev? He told him, not 1 inch eastward. Not 1 inch eastward. And he was referring to the NATO going east of Germany. Because at that time, they were negotiating the reunification of Germany. And Russia was like, oh, hold on, Germany is gonna reunify. And remember, the West Germany is already part of the NATO since what? Since 1955. Okay? But now we're gonna add Eastern Germany. So remember, in 1990, we have the reunification of Germany. And that's when the concern was like, hey, guess what, Mr. Mikhail Gorbachev? just be okay with it. And the NATO is not gonna move not even 1 inch east of Germany. That's what the Russian took it as a promise. Okay. The Americans after that said, no, it's not. There's no binding agreement. We didn't write anything. There was no accord. They were just talking, basically. And he said that. But that's why the Russians feel, and I'm going to mention the word, tricked. That's exactly what Mr. Vladimir Putin used. He said, we felt like we were tricked because there was other promises from what the Russian side says that were even made even after that. That was during the 2000 Clinton visit. When President Clinton visited Moscow in year 2000, he had a conversation with Putin where basically Putin told him, hey, how about if Russia joins the NATO? And Mr. Clinton told him, interesting. Well, sure, huh? All right. Then later on, the same day, this is according to Putin and Clinton, both. I mean, it's written everywhere. What I say, ladies and gentlemen, is in Wikipedia. So I'm not saying any secrets. I'm not mentioning any things that they're not known already. I'm just organizing the events for you guys. Just so you can go to work, do your thing. When you come back late at night, watch me for 5-10 minutes, and you got the summary and the resume of everything. Just when you do, please subscribe, like, leave comments. Guys, you're free to leave comments in any language you want, in French, in Arabic, in English, in anything you want. Again, it's going to help encourage what we are doing in this show. So I'll go back to our dates here. Why we didn't let Russia join the NATO. So far in year, we said 2000, Mr. Vladimir Putin, he felt like he was tricked because during that initial conversation, Mr. Clinton told him, interesting, sure. And then later on the dinner, he told him, I consulted my team and it's not possible. I believe that was tough on Mr. Putin because he felt like, why not? And how come in early you told me this and now you told me that? And that's how it is. And that's how it's been. And that's when basically Russia knew that joining NATO is not possible. And I just wonder, I just want to ask if the goal of the NATO is to guarantee the safety and freedom of its members through political or military actions. I mean, why not guarantee the safety and freedom and the security and freedom of Russia? Isn't that a country too? And isn't that going to guarantee actually that they're not going to go attack any other countries? Because that's your excuse. You're saying, oh, because Russia, they've been attacking other countries next to them, they cannot join the NATO. When you speak to the Russians, they say those areas, especially in the southeast of Ukraine, there was a lot of genocides that were happening. So we had to interfere to help our people because that area is majority Russian speaking. And that's basically almost what they have right now occupied. And we're going to talk about it more as far as what they got to. So I just wanted you, ladies and gentlemen, to understand what happened throughout history. So remember, this is our politicians. That's what they said. Mr. James Baker, he said not 1 inch eastward. I know it's not binding. I know it's not written, but he said that. Also, Nyet means Nyet. You guys already knew it. You knew it's not acceptable to go that close. I understand that the NATO already got to the borders, already through that little north, Estonia and that area right there. All right. And even now later in 23, they got Finland. So they're right there. They're right next to Russia. But Russia is saying, hey, Georgia, Ukraine, they cannot join just due to our defense needs. They don't want the NATO to get there too close. They do military exercises, and one day they say, okay, we're going to invade. Right now, the NATO is not having any boots on ground in Ukraine, and that's what Russia actually want to avoid, because if that happens, now we're going to have a World War III, God forbid, because now Russia is going to have to attack these countries according to them. And that's why no country is having their boots on Ukraine. We're just helping basically with the NATO. That is what's going on right now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go to the famous speech of Mr. Vladimir Putin on February 21st on 2022, where he said that the solution of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was a geopolitical catastrophe. He said that they've been committing genocides in that area, that they are oppressing the Russian-speaking language people. So in that speech, he was blaming Ukraine, that they were getting closer to the West instead of getting closer to the East due to the historical ties that they had. He was blaming Ukraine of committing genocides because of the wars that were going on in the Southeast. And he was also committing them of being very corrupted government. And what he did, when he concluded his speech, he stated, we're going to recognize the state of Luhansk and the Donetsk. Those are the two, the Southeast. Just right immediately after that, which means now he can take his forces and his military forces inside these lands and getting even closer to Ukraine. That was the whole thing, because 3 days later, after the 21st February speech, he's going to announce in another speech where he's going to say, okay, now we're going to go ahead and enter Ukraine, no resistance from Ukrainians, no foreign entity need to interfere with this matter. So they thought they're just gonna go there, there will be no resistance, nobody else is gonna help the Ukrainian, and we are done very quick. Guess what? That didn't happen. Why? Because the Ukrainian, they did resist, and they are still resistant until now. All my respect to that. Seriously, I mean, you were able to resist for this long, guys. Nobody thought you would be able to do it for this long. Everybody thought you're going to last for like a month, 2 months max, because this is the giant Russian army and you are barely Ukraine. You don't even have nuclear power and you depend on the aid from the West, but you guys did it. And we're going to talk about it later, how you did it. How you did it. You're smart, and I respect that. So basically, the slogan that he was talking about when he was invading Ukraine is that he's trying to denazify Ukraine, and he was trying to disarm Ukraine. Ukraine used to be a part of Nazi Germany, by the way, from 1941 to 1944. So I believe that's why he came up with that word. We're going to denazify Ukraine, and we're going to disarm it. So no more armament in there. That way, it's going to be a neutral state, and we are done. We're going to talk about it later, ladies and gentlemen, because I believe that's a great idea. Look at Austria. This is what Professor Jeffrey Sachs from University of Columbia stated, that Austria is the perfect example of neutrality and how there is no wars in there and there is nothing but prosperity. Thank you for staying with us. In next episode, we're going to talk about the details of the invasion, about what happened, where did they start first, and how Ukrainian were able to stop that invasion. Thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you again in the next episode.